I think I'm a special one.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
All right, we're live. Episode 13. What's up, guys?
What's up, Andrew?
Yeah, we got this new guy in the bottom here. What's up, Chad?
What's up? How you guys doing?
Good. All right, so this is our first episode with a guest on. This is my boy Mike Tringali. We played together in college, goalkeeper coach at University of Rochester right now. So excited to have our first guest on.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Pleasure to be here.
Very typical podcast guest intro right there.
Yeah.
All right, so Mike, what are you wearing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I got the 2018-2019 Swansea City away kit.
Very
only
normal.
Just Tringali on the back.
It says
Just Tringali on the back.
no number
thing
though.
Behind this jersey, one of my ex-players from another school I worked at, Northern Illinois University. His name was Alex Welch. He's actually from Swansea, and I helped him buy his first car in the States because the boy needed one to get around, and his parents were so delighted, and he was so grateful that I helped. They mailed me a jersey and kind of inducted me into the Jack family, as they call the top fans of the club. So
that's awesome. That's like that's a cool story.
Yeah, priceless memory and priceless jersey for me. I love probably my favorite. I have maybe two jerseys, but yeah. This easily takes.
I know when I told you had to wear a jersey, you're kind of scrambling, so I felt bad.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wasn't gonna go. I mean, especially with the championship playing this one, I wasn't gonna wear Gianluigi Buffon. That would have gone in a completely different direction.
Nice. All right, Chad, what are you wearing?
So I don't have a jersey on right now, but I'm wearing my Everton training jersey, training pullover, because Everton's on right now. Got it on in the background against Man U.
What is it still 0-0?
It's 2-1 Man U.
Oh, jeez. Dude, I feel like you have so many jerseys here, but at school you have like two jerseys, and you just keep rotating.
I think I've used all of them for the podcast. I need to go home and trade all the ones I used in and get something.
I'll tell you what, the people on TikTok love your Panama jersey, though.
Yeah, maybe I'll wear it again for another podcast.
Yeah. So actually, I was gonna say, well, first I'm wearing I don't know what year this is, but it's a Middlesbrough jersey. No name on the back or anything. Hummel brand though. Website called awaydays.com, and for $25 you get like a mystery kit. So basically, like I just sign up, you put your size, and they send you like a mystery kit. So I got Middlesbrough. It's all right. It looks okay. I got an Olympiacos before, and I think that one's my favorite.
Championship Saturday. Saturday.
When Everton get relegated, then it'll really be Championship Saturday. So hopefully we have some new listeners because so I posted a soccer TikTok on my personal account, and it kind of blew up a little bit. It got right now it's at 23,000 likes. But the purpose of it was I talked about a topic that we talked about in the last episode 12, and I tagged the podcast TikTok page, and we got a bunch of new followers on my page and the TikTok page. So hopefully a bunch of new people are listening. A lot of people said they really like the content because it's interesting to them. So hopefully we got some new listeners too. A lot of people were really interested in the 3 things that we gave them. So Chad, I don't know if you remember, but we were talking about player development and stuff. And I said 3 keys that I think would help me were, number 1 was stepping out of your comfort zone, whether it's finding a new team to challenge yourself or something like that, or just trying to meet new people. Number 2 was number 2, confidence, right? Just believing that you're good enough to be where you are and play with who you're trying to play with. And number 3 was spending time with the ball. So whether that's extra team training or just training on your own or just having fun with the ball, playing pickup games, you got to get to know the ball. So those are the three things, and I think people really like appreciated that. Mm-hmm. All right, so the topics for today, like I said, Mike was goalkeeper at Stevenson University with me. So we'll kind of go through his journey. He's a goalkeeper coach now, grinding out through the college coaching ranks. So this should be pretty interesting. So Mike, you just want to start with like who you are, where you are now, but then go into like where you started your club and all that stuff.
Yeah. So, hey everyone, Mike Tringali, the assistant men's soccer coach at University of Rochester up in upstate New York. This is my fourth year coaching collegiately full time. It's been an awesome ride, but there was definitely a different start, I would say, to where it all began. So I grew up in Glen Ridge, New Jersey. So it's a small town in Essex County, way up north. In an environment where kids, especially young kids, grew up playing a bunch of sports, and then probably specialized in one or two sports when they got to about high school age. So that was kind of my start to it. So grew up playing a ton of sports, but ultimately soccer and lacrosse were two things that really prevailed, probably both culturally and based on interest. And then when I joined a serious club team in Matchfit Academy, and this was kind of like the inception of what is MLS Next, but was the United States Development Academy. I joined the program as a 14-year-old. So that was kind of when I started to give up lacrosse and really pursue soccer full time and hoping to play in college. And that was really the big jump, I would say, to playing in like an environment where you talk about full-time coaches, players that are committed to being there week in, week out, tournaments that happen not just within the state but nationally as well, and playing with some top players all around the state and playing guys all around the country. So when you talk about things like development, there was definitely a culture set then in the training environment that was different to what you would see probably in your run-of-the-mill high school program.
Mike, can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you think a couple here, do you think playing lacrosse and soccer, do you think that helped you at all? Like some people say like you get different athletic benefits from playing different sports, or do you think you would have been better just focusing on soccer?
That's a really good question. So I would say it definitely helped me probably when you come to like things like athleticism and intangibles that you want, and also probably a fitness component as well. But I would say when we kind of get to the deeper root of things like, being a good teammate, increasing your rate of coachability and being exposed to different levels of adversity and problem solving, I would say having that other sport was definitely helped as well. But I mean, another nice component was all my really close friends played. So I think a lot of, young boys and girls and, in our country and the world also probably start out because they play in a team where, maybe some of their closest friends are playing.
Yeah. That's something I think I feel like we kind of overshadow a little bit. Like when we talk about soccer is like, a lot of people think it's just like cutthroat or like try and be as best as you can. But like sometimes it's just like, just get the best experience out of it, whether it's playing lacrosse or soccer. Like you're with your boys, just like playing, like it can be fun. It doesn't have to be super, super serious. So that's kind of cool to hear.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, that's a great point to even, at the college game now, we want to get results and we want to grow, and we have, both extrinsic and intrinsic goals. But, at the end of the day, you're there to give the guys an experience, and you want them to make sure they still enjoy what they're doing.
So another question, you said you went to Matchfit at 14, and I was in New Jersey, like playing in South Jersey, but I remember people thought of Matchfit like way up here, like they were like really good, like especially like early stages of the DA or whatever was it even the DA? Is that what they called it?
I guess, yeah. At its infancy, this was kind of like the big inception of the Development Academy and getting more on a calendar schedule and pulling kids almost away from the high school environment because they felt that the rate that kids could develop would be, a better opportunity in this environment in comparison to that from, switching back from high school to club to high school again and not having like that kind of that staggering point in the development.
So were you on like just like your local, was it like Glen Ridge Soccer, and like were you by far the best player? Like was it just like, oh, Mike's incredible, let's get him on this better team, or how was that?
So, so I played on a travel club, probably just locally. It was like, like the, Glen Ridge soccer team. And then I went to try out at 13 for a kind of a smaller club that was probably a little bit more regional in Soccer Domain FC. It was SDFC at the time. And I just was recommended by a coach and had, a really wonderful trial. And I think what helped as well is all the guys on the current team, really took a liking to me. So when it came time to advocate for a new player, they let me on. But then what actually happened was we were a smaller club that was overperforming so well.
That's awesome.
In the games and the competitions we were playing, that when MatchFit kind of went through their process of increasing their pool of players, they absorbed our team into the club for its age group, and then kind of added players on that.
Wow,
so I wasn't
crazy.
planning really to like be at MatchFit, but when like the opportunity came across for us to go, I think every player and parent unanimously was like, this is what we want for our son.
So they were just like, this is like one of the better teams in the area, let's just kind of like take them on as like a base, and then we'll build the pool from there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a story you probably hear a little bit more often now with clubs. I mean, I probably didn't realize, when I got to coaching in college, that there's also recruitment that happens from club to club within youth soccer. Kids will get sucked up and pulled somewhere else, and maybe it's best for the kid or best for the team. But that's something I've probably taken more of a notice of in the last few years.
That would honestly be an interesting topic for like another podcast. Like we talked about a couple weeks ago, like recruiting, like club teams recruiting players from other club teams.
Yeah. So that was a really interesting point. But yeah, I mean, so from there, it was a great experience, I think, for me and all the guys, not just from fostering new relationships that were out of, my hometown, but also, the training environment. So you're training, 4 times a week, sometimes goalkeeping specific training as well. So you're nearly training every day, and you're having games on the weekends. So there's no shortage of opportunities to play, of reps. So really had a great experience. And I even still, communicate with some of those guys today, because I think a good amount of us all went to, go and play in college, and we can have, similar experiences, and we both kind of have a similar beginning.
Was your like transition to play at that high level, like one, were you at that level? Like, was it hard for you to adapt? And two, did you like kind of like burn out, or was it like, wow, this is like too like soccer overload?
So it was definitely, from a schedule standpoint, and we talk about, of course, like having a balance at that age. So you want to do well academically and socially, but also, in your passion. So it was definitely I think at first I took a decent bit. I took probably a hit in the classroom. You're getting out at
that stuff doesn't matter. Who cares?
Class. Yeah, you're getting out of class at maybe right as the bell ends, and you're running down to the car, and mom's packed a turkey sandwich so you can drive an hour and a half to the training setup, and that happened quite a bit. But I would say in terms of my play, I think I always had a good set of athleticism. I was probably a little bit more raw. I wouldn't say technically, but like just developing a soccer IQ and my speed of play. I think definitely, developing a better understanding of, where to use the ball with my feet and organize, the people in front of me was something that maybe didn't come naturally. I was probably, I could make, a really good save and be decisive in that sense. But I think like just developing a broader soccer education was probably the most helpful thing.
Yeah. And like we talked about it before on this podcast, like exposing yourself to a higher level, even if like you play, you don't play, you just train, like you ride the bench, like those little things like actually like make a difference. You know what I mean? Being around better players, you kind of see like what they do or like what makes them good in certain drills or certain settings. And it's actually like really helpful. So
absolutely,
like, you getting exposed to that at a young age, like especially with goalkeepers, because like you watch the goalkeeper coach or the other goalkeepers and you pick up on things like that. So did they like, is that where you got recruited to play in college, like from MatchFit?
Yeah, so I think one thing that not just the players but the parents ended up appreciating about the club is it was it was really focused on making sure they didn't just place kids at the best programs they could, but the program that was ultimately a best fit for the player.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's other factors that go into it as well. But yeah, the amount of, high level games and tournaments we were playing in ultimately increased our exposure. And, you end up now playing at events where coaches are watching in a good amount. So you don't just have to, attend camps throughout a summer or reach out to coaches. At this point, they're kind of reaching out to you, and it helps the whole process so you can ultimately, have your pick of schools and make the best decision. So they were really great on that front of helping pair kids up with schools and getting them in touch with coaches too.
Yeah, that's cool. And especially like at that high of a level, like there isn't a whole lot of like club or academy to pro yet. That setup's not there. Especially there's no, unless you're like ridiculous and you're going from like academy to MLS reserves, there's no USL, there's no like USL League One or that kind of stuff. So then it's pretty natural path to go to college. Like what was being like from a big club, were there interest from like bigger colleges, or were you always like Stevenson was pretty small, so were you looking like that?
That's a great question. So I mean, there was interest from bigger institutions, but I think it would probably get to a point, the bigger the institution got, the more I was recruiting them than they were recruiting me. So if there was interest from like a bigger school, they probably weren't looking at me to have necessarily an immediate impact on the field coming in as a first year student. So you kind of like sift through that as well and see where you think you're gonna, not only be able to play, but also probably have the most value within a team. But yeah, I mean, like you said, Kat, the fact that we're talking about kind of the infancy of the development academy. At this point, there weren't a whole lot of guys like we see now signing homegrown contracts and going abroad. The prominent goal still at this point for top level players was to go to college and to get a scholarship if they could. So it's a great point as well.
So you went to, so obviously you ended up going to Stevenson, same place that I went. You were 1 year older than me, so you were a high school class of what was it, 2013?
Yep, 2013.
So like go through the college experience, because like I always talk about how I didn't play a lot or get like consistent minutes a lot till my senior year of college. And I just think I was like a late bloomer in soccer. Like some things clicked late. I was always like kind of training on my own, and like it finally like started to click towards the end. Like what was your development like as a goalie? And especially like in college, it's so results driven that like they're going to play the older guy or the guy they trust more. And like, they might not be a better goalkeeper, or.
Yeah. So, coming in as a freshman, there were maybe 6 other goalkeepers, and this was a byproduct of, I think, the goalkeeping group they had last year had significantly underperformed, hence my recruitment and the recruitment of a few others as walk-on. So right away, I'd relished that challenge because, always traditionally I was the number one, whether it was playing in high school or playing with match fit, so it was definitely a different scenario to place yourself in where, the competition is a little more ruthless. You're not always going to be the first guy. So your training mentality definitely develops from the sense of not just competing with others, but being the best you can be every day. So, I came in and I probably had my most exponential period of growth in that first year, because one thing that I certainly had a tough time with in the beginning was the physicality of the game. So you come into an environment now where guys have not only been playing 3 or 4 years longer than you have, but they've also been lifting during that time. So I was probably this string bean that could make a brilliant save, but you asked me to come claim a cross, and I was probably getting knocked to the ground with an instant. So one of the things that was probably a big focus for me and the goalkeeping coach, was Mike Ratcliffe, who we still have a great relationship today, was just making sure I was getting comfortable with contact. So the great thing about that, because of his availability and when you have that many keepers, you can make a bigger, more game realistic session, was the ball goes in the air, when Mike goes to claim it, he gave guys specific instructions, you knock him over. And we'll do it again and again. And, that was something that always kind of, will stick with me, because it was kind of like, embrace the challenge. And also, you got to grow up a little bit. Mom and dad are far away from home. At this point, it's sink or swim and get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's what I feel like a lot of people miss about they think college soccer is just no matter what college, oh, it's bad soccer or they miss development, but there's a lot of other development going on too. Like you said, you're away from home, you're doing things on your own, and you're with a bunch of players that might not play like you or might be bigger or smaller than you or whatever, and you just have to fit in. You got to make it work. So you figuring out how to make it work on the fly is pretty important.
Yeah. And you brought up such a great point there. I grew up in, Glen Ridge all my life, from birth to 18 years of age. And then, you're going 4 hours away from home, and it may not be too far, but, there are some things, you go down the road in life, and, people live a little bit differently, or you run into someone else that has a different background. So those were definitely cool components as well. But that first year was probably, the biggest year of growth I had. And also I maybe played in about 3 or 4 games. So you started to develop as well that idea of, and this was something, Coach Rackle would say is, you're one play away. So which meant that if you're not the starter right now, you at least mentally have to be prepared for whatever might happen during the game. So if you're called upon, you're ready to go. And I know that's something we see, a lot of people talk about today in terms of mentality too.
So your freshman year, that was my senior year of high school, and that was when I was being recruited to play at Stevenson. So I ended up going a few games, just trying to, watch college soccer. I didn't know much about it, and like you kind of talked about, it was kind of like a goalkeeping carousel, just a bunch of guys in and out. So how often were you called upon? Were you close to being a consistent starter? Is that bad for goalkeepers? Is it awkward?
No, so I think at that point I was probably also still adjusting to college life. So just getting out to training every day was an added bonus. At that point, we'd have a goalkeeping specific session in the afternoon that was, after you got done with class for an hour, and then we joined with the rest of the team. So that 3-hour block was the best part of my day.
That's awesome,
because you knew that you were going to get, reps in before the rest of the session when you were kind of rotating, and also it was just a great way to kind of cap off your day. But I would say I was probably consistently in that time, I switched between being the number 2 and the number 3, most times number 3. But there were definitely instances, I think, where if there was an opportunity to bring me on and help me get minutes, I think Coach Pleviak definitely wanted to do that. I remember probably one of my more rude awakenings into college soccer was we were playing Messiah, who at that point had, I think, just come off winning the national championship, and they were going to do so again. And they were one of the best teams I'd ever seen my entire life. And we went there to their stadium when they were honoring one of their old coaches, and there were probably 3,000 fans there. I didn't even know that number existed for attendance in Division III. And we go there, and it's pouring rain. And I think we were maybe losing 3-0 in the first half, and I played the whole second half and didn't concede a goal.
Nice.
And actually made some pretty big saves, but the thing was, it was pouring rain, so my shirt was just drenched, dripping wet. I had this smock of a kit at the end of the game. But I remember that was my rude awakening into college soccer, because the game was, you don't realize how fast it is sometimes until you step on.
That's the infamous Diesel red card game.
That's the infamous, Stefan Diesel red card. After that, we had no chance.
So, but that's I've noticed that too. Being subbed on in any game is kind of crazy, but especially when you're either not a regular starter, not a regular player, one of the younger guys or something, and you sub onto a game and you're holy crap, this is so fast.
Yeah, I mean, crazy. And especially some of the unfair points. I mean, I could think of Chad, correct me if I'm wrong here, but a goalkeeper gets sent off and gives away a penalty, and the other guy comes on real quick, and his first play of the game is he either has to make the most important save in the game, or he concedes a goal with his first stint on the field. So yeah, for different players in different positions, it can definitely be a rude awakening for sure.
So that's your freshman year. You're pretty. Chad's awake.
You
Can you hear us, Chad?
Yeah, I can hear it.
No, seriously, it was kind of going in and out a little bit. So So that's like your freshman year. Going through college, did you play for, like, did you put in a lot of extra work in the summer? Any summer teams? Like, how, take us through like the next few years.
So, the great thing about, the size of the club at Matchfit as well was when we all, came back home for the summer, there was enough of us to have, kind of a summer team.
Oh, that's cool.
And, we play against some other under 23 opponents, pretty informally. We probably had our own workout packets from school we were following throughout the summer, and, doing what college kids do as well. You take the opportunity as well to, us Jersey's guys go to the beach and see people you hadn't seen before. But I think it definitely ticked up my junior year of school, and going into my senior year, I trained and was kind of a reserve keeper with the Jersey Express, who, it's a defunct club now, but they were in the PDL. And these were guys that were, playing in the Big East or, playing in the A10. And they were really prominent players. And the training environment, although it was the summer, these guys did not take a second off. And we had great experiences, not just playing local competition, but also playing in the Open Cup. Going and playing teams like New York Cosmos. And although, you talk about things like some of the experiences you can get from not just playing on the field, maybe just in training, but I played with I was understudy to a guy named David Gretschek, who he was drafted his senior year to Sporting KC. And, he was probably one of the best players when you talk about a goalkeeper I ever played with. So just taking intangible things from watching him in training, watching him in games, I think were things that probably helped me so far, like down the road, and especially in that last year of college as well.
That's cool. We talked, it might've been one of the first episodes about like mine and Chad's like soccer journey. And I talked about how like I spent like a summer just like kind of training with the PDL team and like didn't really get on the field, play like a few friendlies, but like being like, it's such like a different environment because you got all these like good college players. A lot of them are foreigners too. They're not like local kids. And like, you just kind of put them on a team, put them on a field and like let them play. And the season comes so quick. Like you're kind of learning on the fly, like what these guys do. And it's just like a different experience that I think helps, especially as a goalkeeper too. Like you're probably like playing with better competition. You're facing like harder shots, like better training, like all that stuff.
Yeah, the cues are different. I think what you realize as well as a goalkeeper when you go through the levels is, forwards, the higher level, they get a little bit smarter. And they might be reading you, in the goal mouth as much as you're trying to read them. So that was definitely something I picked up. But it's amazing that, especially in teams like that, you have guys like within the same group, but they all might have different goals. So some guys on that team were actually, and I'm sure for that team you played on as well, Kat, some guys are looking to get pro contracts. Yeah. Some guys are looking to stay fit for college. And then some guys are really just trying to, have a different experience. So it's great you kind of mesh all those things together in one team.
Yeah. There's like PDL, not as much as NPSL now, but like, it's like you said, there's dudes like going back to college who might be really good, but just finished like their freshman year at a big school. There might be like a senior or a junior who's like done with college and all they want to do is get signed or get drafted or whatever. Then there's like an older guy maybe who's literally just trying to keep the dream alive. Like this might be his last opportunity to like get a contract or something like that. So you have all those things and like, dudes are getting stuck in training or like going hard in games. It's pretty cool. Like it's a cool experience.
Yeah. And I think for guys like you and me, we relish that because then it's like you go back to, the college environment or, who cares if it's a step over or a step down, but you take those things back and, it helps you kind of reinforce the play and make sure guys are following, what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. So after that, you said that was going into your, junior year?
Yeah, so a bit of my junior year, and then kind of this is actually an interesting point. In the summer of my senior year, I played in what was called a semi-professional club in Baltimore. But I didn't even play in the first game because I had a traumatic had a neck injury. I kind of snapped the C3 in my spine, in my cervical spine. So I basically spent the whole summer in bed rehabilitating. I could barely move. All the gains I had probably made in the weight room and on the field in the spring, I'd completely lost all of them. It was really debilitating. But what would happen, and you remember this, is in July we got a new coach.
Yeah.
And I knew straight away, being, probably one of two seniors on the team, that I probably needed to get healthy and get fit more than anything. I couldn't just forego a year, not just from being a presence on the field, but also in the locker room.
Yeah.
So I devoted the end point of that summer, and thank goodness for Carrie Foreman, our old athletic trainer. She actually helped me rehabilitate in a way that I could get back on the field safely and regain some of my strength. So I think you probably remember I missed, I think, the entire preseason, but I was ready to go for that first game, and that was the most important thing for me, not just like as a captain, but as a teammate.
I remember like our first few years with the first coach that we had, like there'd be off seasons where we didn't really do much. It wasn't much of a team. Like guys lived off campus, like nothing was really enforced. And then like we knew we were getting a new coach, and like finally some dudes like started taking it seriously. Like so we actually did a lot of lifting and like working out with MC, our strength coach, and Coach Q and all them. So I remember like we would be in the weight room, and you were literally the only senior there. And it was us guys, the sophomores, that like made up the bulk of the people there, and a few freshmen.
Yeah.
Like you get hurt, and then that kind of, not that it takes away all your gains, but you lose like all your momentum going in.
Yeah.
But you're still like one of the only older guys on the team. Like it was.
Yeah. I think that was, definitely frustrating, when I looked back on it, because so much of it was out of my control.
Mm-hmm.
And of course I didn't know as a freshman that, there were guys that were simply going to, fall out of love with the game or take an interest in other things and pursue other parts of their lives. But I think when that opportunity kind of came across to step up and be, probably a more prominent guy, both in the locker room and on the field, I didn't question it, because I knew that's kind of what the team needed, because, we were so young at that point. And, the program is something that's timeless. I mean, you and I will go through our spells there and move on, and so will coaches, but the program always, remains, what it is. So
yeah, it got pretty rough there for a little bit, but like that's one of the things I think about a lot is like there could be a good player and like you can recruit him and whatever, but like if you just recruit guys who just like love the game and like live it and like that's what they do, like you're gonna be okay. But a lot of those guys that came to Stevenson, like maybe it was the school itself, or maybe they just didn't love the game. They just didn't stick with it all 4 years. And like that could be a problem, that the coach or someone running the program, that could be their fault. It could just be recruiting the wrong guys. It could just be like a fluke thing. But like it happened in your class, happened in my class, or a lot of guys come in, maybe they don't see success right away. They just kind of quit. Right. And then it leaves you as like the only senior basically.
Yeah, and I think you bring up like a good point in there. And I mean, Chad, you can correct me kind of if I'm wrong, especially in your environment now at Immaculata. But I think there's something that happens sometimes in like the development of players, and especially young men. You kind of start to get that arrogance, like I'm the guy. So I think we talk about this a little bit at the U of R. There's good talent and there's good players. So when you have a talent that's constantly being told how good he or she is. And now they kind of have this thing set in stone that they are, good enough. They don't necessarily have to improve. They are where they are, just based on them alone. You kind of get, people that are complacent and, maybe some things related to character that not just destabilize their development, but the rest of the team. So I feel like, and Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, you see these guys kind of come through, and I'm sure in your environment now, you probably have come across some of these guys quite a bit, because it can happen in any team.
Yeah, definitely happens in our team. People get come in, get complacent. I feel like college soccer is kind of like that way, where a lot of guys will come in and then fade out, like they won't make it to their senior year. I don't know why it's like that,
Chad, I honestly think you guys done like your program, Immaculata, like you guys have a good rate of like guys coming in as freshmen and finishing as seniors. Maybe they don't improve, but like they finish. At Stevenson, we had so many guys that would come in and just not finish. But
I feel like it's just a different school, though.
Yeah,
but
like
we still got those guys, but you guys had so many at your school. I don't know why.
But I think like Chad, you brought up a good point, because like a guy he'll finish a season and he'll be like, yeah, man, like we're going to kill it next season. And then they just like sit on the couch for like 5 or 6 months and then don't do anything. Like you don't get better like that. You don't live and breathe the game like that. Just like,
Yeah.
Yeah. And, that's a big part of, I guess, of recruitment too, being on the other side of it now is, when you get to some of these college programs, big or small, everyone is a captain of their high school team or has some sort of all conference recognition or played on a decent club. So, everyone thinks like they're the guy. Well, wake up, there's a locker room full of those guys now. So, how are you going to distinguish yourself and set yourself apart from the others? Well, for starters, it's going to be your work ethic. So I think, that was disappointing to see, but, I think nonetheless, I know, in your junior year, Kat, and my senior year, we probably didn't win as many games as we wanted to, but you talk about things from like a personal perspective, to be so, injured and out of shape, during the summer due to my injury, the fact that I could come back and play every minute, individually for that team, that was a massive victory. So when, after that year, I felt no need to play onward in any sort of capacity. I really felt like I left it all out there.
So, before we get to that, like just on your senior year, so you played every minute, which is kind of crazy to think about. Were you like, do you think you were rusty, or like, do you think you like kind of gave it your, obviously you gave it your best effort, but like, were you at your best? Cause you still had like a ridiculous season, and like, we weren't that good, and we would have been like much worse without you in goal.
Yeah, I think, and even in the pro teams this season, I think when the goalkeeper is winning player of the season, there might be some things on the team that have to be fixed. But I think the biggest thing for me, at least, and what I was able to kind of work on in the summer, if anything, was, my mentality. So when I came back, I feel like that kind of reinforced everything, like the muscle memory and the strengths of my game. I think I just came back an overall a calmer player.
Yeah.
So the last thing I ever wanted to do, especially in a young team being in the goal, was transmit anxiety to anyone on the field or in the locker room. So I think I wanted you guys to look back at me no matter what the scoreline of the game was, and just see that I was, ready for the next play. And I think, at that point, I was surprised with myself, the level of form that I kind of came back into, because like there was really no preparation. It was just kind of thrown back into the fire, but it was something I was definitely like proud of doing, and it was definitely rewarding at that point at the end.
And that was like so we lost. So we only won a few games, and we got beat up in a few, right? But like there was also some close games with some good teams. So it wasn't like we were like, it was hit or miss sometimes, but like it wasn't like we were not competitive in a lot of those games. Like we fought, and like part of that's because you had to make a lot of saves. But that was a fun year. Like even if you're losing, like you could still get something out of it.
Yeah, I think like one thing is results, and one thing is the growth. And I think, hopefully by the end of the year, we saw growth in guys in the program that probably wasn't there to begin with. But yeah, I think comparatively as well, when the recruitment is down, and I think the difficulty of your schedule is going up, you're kind of at two entities that are working against each other. But I think great for us to go ahead and play really, really prominent programs and see where we match up. Throughout that whole year was good. But I mean, there were points where we were maybe starting, 5 or 6 freshmen.
And even
11.
Just for me that year, I remember thinking like, I thought I was in like really good. So kind of like the opposite for you, because you had to like rehab the whole summer. I was like in really good shape, like ready to go. And like, it just didn't work out. I just didn't play well. I was like not confident. But then that helped like spring me to have like a better senior year, because I learned from that. I knew like it wasn't just about being in good shape and whatever. I had to be like really sharp, really like on it mentally, and like go challenge myself.
Yeah.
So,
I think at that point the last, like you and I probably, at that point, we're probably, about 20, 21 years old. We're probably reflecting more on the games that we had in more mature ways too. So I think that helped us too. And being able to kind of confide in you was like a big part of not getting so frustrated with maybe what was going on the field at times.
I think we both like thought the game at like a pretty high level. And I think we were both able to like kind of look at it a different way, rather than like the way some other guys thought about it. So being like basically the only senior, right? There was a few guys that were in and out. and being like one of the leaders and whatever, did you know you wanted to get into coaching, and like what were you doing your senior year to like set yourself up for that?
So I think as a senior, I kind of knew that I wanted to still be involved with the game at a really high capacity. I thought coaching at that point was the best way to do that, and the best way to also kind of give back. I mean, soccer through the years had given me so much more than I ever imagined it would, and it still continues to do so. So at that point, I thought that was the route, and our coach, Andrew Bordelon was a big part of that process, because you talk about an older player at the end of his career, a young coach kind of at the beginning of his. There's things to learn from each other. So he would pull me into the office consistently throughout the week and show me film and help me watch it in a certain way, and we would analyze opposition and talk about my own game. And I think it kind of not only helped me reconnect my position with the rest of the team, but also kind of allowed me to see from like a tactical perspective how things can go right and wrong in the moment.
So this was during the season, during your senior
yeah
season?
So this was more or less during that fall, and then it kind of happened a little bit afterwards in the winter and the spring. But at that point, as soon as we had finished that season in the fall of 2012, I immediately started doing my coursework for some of my licenses. So at that point, I had I'd saved up a little bit of money, and I went out to Colorado, and I did my advanced national goalkeeping diploma with it was the NSCAA at that time, what is now United Soccer Coaches. So just placing myself in an environment where you talk about prominent college coaches, MLS coaches, director coaches, people of different backgrounds, just a young guy amongst a lot of what I considered adults at that time. So that was great as well. And then just also kind of getting around the area and helping out locally. So I started being part of a goalkeeping setup in a few towns over from where we were in Owings Mills in Carroll County, Maryland, just doing camps and helping out with youth and taking my maybe recent experience as a player to help theirs. So these were all cool things that I kind of embarked on afterwards. Yeah,
it's kind of cool because like we started coaching at like different like points in our career and whatever, but like I kind of like experienced the same thing now that you phrase it that way. Like when I was playing, I wanted something else out of the game, and I thought like I'll play as long as I could, whatever, as long as it like worked out. So I played a little bit after college, but like when you used to talk about like coaching a few towns over and just like doing like little camps and stuff like that, I kind of did that too, just like locally here. Or when I was with the Fury, they like hooked you up with a coaching job. So I did that like once a week or whatever. And like, it kind of just like, you get your foot in the door, you kind of learn a little bit, you kind of understand like what coaching is. And it's like kind of different than what we thought, but so if you're talking with Coach Bordelon, like during the season, do you think that helped your game on the field?
Yeah, I would say 100%, man. I mean, there were things that he was showing me, like even little details that I probably would have never learned. And I'm happy I learned them when I did, so I could pass on the knowledge. But it was even things like small things like where you place the ball in a goal kick to give yourself equal opportunity to distribute in both directions. Cheating the look higher up the field and seeing where high, low, and middle blocks were to see if you could play through, beyond, or over certain lines of pressure. So I mean, things like that I think were immense for me. Organizing things in certain ways so maybe you don't even have to make a save. So we're talking about really, really profound things here, and I think also he just gave me a good idea of the work that goes into it, because I kind of started to see the amount that him and Jack Mathis, the other assistant, would prepare a training session.
Oh, snap!
Opposition scouting. So there's so much work that goes done behind the scenes with that.
You good? I think you froze up for a sec, but we're good now.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, that's cool because like I started doing that a little bit too, but like I didn't really get into coaching until like the very end of my playing. But then when I finished playing and I got more into coaching, I started like learning a lot more. I feel like it made me a better player. Like I talk about it, like I'm not as sharp as I was or like as in as good a shape, but if I stepped on the field right now and really gave it 100%, like I feel like I'd be a much better player. Like,
That's so
remember me telling you how I was going to play for that Atlantic City team in the U.S. Open Cup?
yeah, of course.
I went to like a few practices and like a scrimmage, and I was like, holy crap, I feel like I think the game at such a higher level, and like I can communicate it to like whoever I'm playing with. So that's such a benefit that you got to do that while still playing in college and like trying to implement that in games and practices during your senior year.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a funny point. Like, I think sometimes I would just, hop into a session with some of my college guys.
Yeah.
And, although I probably wasn't as quick or limber as I was a few years back, like I think like my positioning and just, my level of anticipation of knowing the flows of the game, where the ball was going to go, I was probably a lot, more intelligent of a player.
Dude, the flow of the game, which you just said, is so right. It's not so much like one or two moments, but you understand like the flow of it so much better.
Yeah, I think
Like
seeing like 4, 5, 6 steps ahead now was like, oh wow, well this is what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah, and then I think I could start recognizing where I went right and wrong in my career, or who was a good coach, who was a bad coach, like what they were trying to do. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think, if you're able to have a slew of phenomenal coaches throughout your whole development, then great. Kudos to you. But I think, as you get older, you kind of, start to reflect and look back on, maybe things that, didn't make a whole lot of sense, or, maybe their intent was the right way, but it probably wasn't delivered or executed the way they thought. So it's great to see those things now and kind of, compare and contrast different styles and people too.
Because now I feel like when we were players, we just kind of did what the coach told us to do in training, right? But now I watch a training session, or like if I go back and like play in a training session, I'm like, oh, that's a great way to like transition, like great couple drills in a row, or great sequence, or a great training session. Like you evaluate it now in your head. But when we were players, we just kind of did whatever the coach told us to do. And most of the time it made no sense. Like, I know what sessions you're thinking of too, man.
No, I'm sure you do. I mean, I think we probably think more now of the why, and not just like we're doing this because this is what's instructed.
Some people just take a bunch of things, throw it out there, and let you go do it. It's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm sure as a player now, Chad, you're still probably like, why are we doing this right now? But you have to do it.
Yeah, I get that sometimes, but you guys probably understand better now.
Mm-hmm.
What's going
on? So you run through like your coaching, like how you started, like what you thought you were going to do, how you started coaching pretty quick. And then I have like a few questions to ask you about that.
So, I mean, not a lot of people probably know is, I guess, better place to say it than ever. But I honestly thought after, finishing up my degree, I was going to go back up to Jersey and go to Manhattan and, get a big kid job. And it would just be something I did on the side, just kind of the love of it and see where it took me. But I got a phone call after, spending that time in Carroll County. And this is going on into the summer of 2017. And there was a college down the street from us, Goucher College, a small college in Towson, that, they needed an assistant, a guy to help out, throughout the entire season and to help the head coach. So I went over there and just told them, kind of their head coach, Brian Lott, what I was about and what I was looking to do. And, it paid very little money, but at that point, you're 22 and you have a car and you don't have any debts. So you're like, all right, let's go the experience route and see where this gets us. So it kind of just threw me right into it. Now I'm like, running sessions with the help of a head coach, scouting opposition, you're recruiting around the state. You're doing the logistical work that goes into, like team travel and things like that. So that really, like you talk about growth as a player, like in your first environment, like my growth as a coach in my first environment was in a college environment that was pretty immense. And I think that guys kind of took a liking to me as well right away, because being a younger guy and having some tangible experience was really nice at that point.
Mm-hmm. So do you think as a coach, so soccer wise, do you think at Goucher you grew a lot, or do you think it was more like on the admin organization, like getting that stuff right?
Yeah, I would say probably all of the above. I was, you know, I think I did think sometimes with the right intention, but maybe not realizing that there was maybe a better outlet to go. I think if you ask me now, like kind of the confines in my theory of what goes into a session, it's probably way more refined now than it was then. But I was basically at that point, this young, you know, an enthusiastic guy, you know, that just wants to help the group. And I think I was just prepared to do, especially for a guy like that, Brian, that gave me such a wonderful opportunity. I mean, I would have ran through a brick wall for him if he told me that that was the best thing to do next. I mean, he was a really, really good mentor. And, you know, we still have conversations today, but he kind of started the path to showing me that in certain teams, there's things that you want to do, but there's so many things that you can do based on the level, based on the players you have, based on the opposition you're playing. So that was a real big awakening into, I'm sure a lot of teams want to do things that they're probably restricted to do for whatever reason that is.
I'm learning that too with coaching high school. Like, we're lucky we have a really good team, but there's things you want to do, and then there's things that, like, maybe the schedule doesn't allow for that, or how much you can train, or like that kind of stuff too. And then in college, you get budget, recruiting, like all that stuff. And that's a lot.
Yeah, like we'd love to see Immaculata connecting 26 passes in their own third and going down the field and scoring, you know, what looks like an easy goal. But, you know, it doesn't always happen like that.
Maybe if their center midfielder just made a late run into the box once in a while.
Yeah, I think
it's for Michael Bradley.
Something.
The ball always finds its way to the top of the box, and nobody's there.
Yeah, come on, Chad.
I'll get it together.
I'll get it together. All right. So after, I remember my senior year, you were still coaching at Goucher. I was sitting there playing Fortnite in the morning, and you called me and you're like, hey, I got this opportunity to go be an assistant at like Division I school. I was like, oh, that's sick. And then we were talking about it. So like talk through that and like how you left Goucher and what that was about. I remember playing, I wasn't any good at it, but.
So, yeah, like the big thing next was, you know, an opportunity came down to, and this is a big, you know, point for anyone. You never know who's watching, you know, do as best you can and do a good job in whatever you're doing, because someone will definitely take notice. And, you know, Brian's best friend was the head coach at Virginia Military Institute, which was a small, you know, constantly rebuilding Division I program in Lexington, Virginia. And they wanted another assistant and someone with more of a goalkeeping background and a young guy once again. But that was kind of my big awakening into, you know, you're either gonna coach in a different capacity, or this is kind of your ticket into, you know, like full-time college coaching.
Yeah.
So almost like a sink or swim moment at that point. But it was also the first time in my life, I think I had been in Baltimore at that time for 5 years. So it was the only other place I'd lived before. So it was also going to be a bit of a culture shock as well. But I think, you know, so ultimately, you know, I ended up interviewing well and getting the position. And, you know, the next thing I knew, I was throwing everything in my car and going down to Lexington, Virginia. So, you know, you talk about things like, you know, adapting to the soccer. But I think I was just adapting at that point to just living in what seemed like a different world.
Yeah.
So
do you think the Division I was the soccer a challenge, or was the like recruiting restrictions, or like just the intensity of Division I?
So I think I realized at that point, you know, we talked, you know, a few seconds ago about the things you want to do and the things you can. Well, you know, VMI was a place where you could probably not do more things than you could. There are probably more restrictions. I mean, you're talking about an institution that probably had maybe 3.5 scholarships competing against programs that had 9.9. So, you know, week in, week out, you're bringing a knife to a gunfight. And, you know, and in certain, you know, pillars of intercollegiate athletics, you have the academics, then you have the soccer. Well, at VMI, you have the academics, that is firstly, then you have the military component, and then you have athletics. So you go from playing in school where, you know, soccer is probably the second priority, where now, you know, soccer is the third. So how do the guys treat it differently? You know, how do you kind of adapt as a coach to make sure that guys are, you know, coming down from the hill after getting yelled at by drill sergeants all day and still having a productive session? So at that point, you're just hoping as well that you're getting the guys to come down. They're going to be enthusiastic about playing, which a lot of times they were, but sometimes, you know, stylistically, you have to change your coaching and your, you know, and your criticisms to make sure that, you know, guys aren't being pushed over the edge to a point where, like we said, early on, like the game isn't fun anymore.
Yeah. So you're managing, like, it's more as if you're managing players too. It's not just soccer. It's not just a regular college program. Like, you really got to get into the mind of your players and know what they're doing.
Yeah. So, and, you talk about places that, that kids come in and out of, usually you think your first year of college is the easiest. You'll have it in those 4 years when it comes to stress levels, workload, adaptation. Well, I think the first semester of your first year at VMI is the hardest, not just in those 4 years, but probably any place in the country, bar the federal service academies, because you come in right away and there's all these things you have to do. And it makes it really hard on top of that, I think, to be a collegiate athlete. So that was definitely a culture shock for me. And I probably, called you several times a week being like, you're not gonna, even guess what I saw up on the hill today. So
yeah, I remember I went to one of your games. You guys played in Philly against St. Joe's, and I went. You guys lost, but like, it was cool to see. Like, it was a competitive game. Like, it wasn't like you guys were not competitive in some of these games. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to see at that point, like, even though we were probably the worst program in Division I, the speed of play, the physicality, the level was still, considerably high.
Yeah.
For what it was.
Like, it's not like these guys are bad players. It's just there's so much other stuff going on too.
Yeah.
So when you went to VMI, were you looking at Division I as like full-time job? Were you trying to get full-time job? Were you on your path to being like a Division I head coach down the road? And like, why did you leave VMI?
So I think at that point, I wanted to be coaching collegiately full-time. I thought that Division I was the best place to do it because, at that point, I thought that was the highest level and I was going to have the most involvement. You're working on a calendar year where you're working with the guys and you're allowed to a lot more often, whether that's with the ball, without. And I thought the cool thing was, like, a Division I program on the men's side, it's allowed to have a maximum of 4 coaches. So when you take 205 programs, you're talking about, under 1,000 assistants and head coaches in that entire realm. So it kind of felt like a little bit of a fraternity, that is. So, the amount of teams is condensed, and also, the people you're working with is also, in a smaller quantity. So that's something that really fascinated me. So I thought, to stay at that level as long as I could would be great. But, it also kind of opened up for me, there's great coaches at every level, whether it's Division I to grassroots to professionally. But, I got a phone call in that December, actually, after the season had ended, and it was from, our head coach at Stevenson, for that 1 year. Andrew Borlon was the first assistant and the recruiting coordinator at Northern Illinois, and they wanted a goalkeeping coach and someone they could trust. So I once again, I moved to the middle of Illinois in at the end of December, early January. And that was really, really where things kind of got going in that sense, because, it was a fully funded, Division I program. We're talking about guys now, they're looking to, they're aspiring professionals. So you're taking what experience you have and trying to, help them with that process. It was a program that was also being rebuilt in a season where they may not have had a winning record, but they beat Akron, who was in their conference, who had gone to the national championship that year against the University of Maryland. So it had these makings of a really exciting, program on the cusp. And the great thing as well was I had learned so much from Borlon from our time at Stevenson. And one of his big mentors was Ryan Swan, who was the head coach at NIU. So I thought, wow, if I could learn from the source from one of my mentors and make that experience kind of my own, that would really help my growth and my knowledge as well.
That's cool. So were you like eager to leave VMI, or was it just like, this opportunity is too good for my career kind of thing?
Yeah, I think a little bit of a mix of both. Once again, it was like, all right, so now I'm moving further away from, my friends and family. What does that look like? But at that point, I think I was just so intrigued of of going and having this experience. I think I wasn't even thinking about that at that point. I probably would have lived in a box by the side of campus if if I could, if it wasn't actually so freezing. But but it was great from that point, not just from the college aspect, but part of the job requirement was to be the director of a local club. So what was really interesting is you're working, with scholarship athletes, aspiring professionals by day. And then at night, I'm working with, 10, 11, maybe 13-year-olds, high school girls.
Yeah.
And you just kind of get back down to that, like we said, just making the session fun, making sure people are falling in love with the game. So like that experience for me was really interesting.
I think that helps at the same time you're working with these dudes who are legit soccer players, can adapt to different styles and whatever. And then people who don't quite know the game yet, they're just trying to put it together. I feel like that helps.
Yeah, I think you learn more about yourself as a coach in that standpoint. And I think the best coaches in our game can effortlessly coach at all levels. Mm-hmm. And they may adjust some things, whether it's their language or their style, but they're always getting the message across of, beginning with the end in mind and wanting to accomplish something. Mm-hmm. I was never a big believer of, I coach at this level a lot, so I'm not going to do that. It was like humbling as well. And an opportunity to kind of, try things. Like I said earlier, my focus was goalkeeping, but something I had always kind of wanted to step out a little bit more was running my own sessions. So it became a great sandbox and a think tank where you can, try out certain things and see what works.
That's so you at NIU would run the goalkeeper sessions. Did you ever run the full team sessions, or were you just with the goalkeepers? And then did running the U13, U14, did that help you get easier transition to running a full 11v11 team session?
Yeah. So, basically the way it would work out is I would plan a goalkeeping session that was kind of in conjunction with what the team was working on. Mm-hmm. So if I go into the office, then I'm in there with Coach Swan, and he says, okay, well, we want to work on, service from wide positions to get, and then runners in the box in the attacking third. Then, the probably counter principle of that for running a session with the goalkeepers would be commanding the area, working on things like crosses. So whatever,
you make them look bad and your guys look good.
Yeah. So whatever I was working on in my session, it was to ultimately prepare them for the team session. So when they step in, they've already done the movements. We've gone over the cues and what to expect. So it was at that point I kind of started to have a deeper understanding of the principles and the counter principles, not just in a game, but also from the goalkeeping to the field player environment. So
could you sorry, Mike, if at that point, could you have stepped in and run a pretty good training session and put it all together with the field players as well?
Yeah, I think I would have had, a really good idea, but also I think at that point, the players are just so intelligent. They're so competitive. They're so athletic and fast and, technically sound. I think I could have probably ran a lot of different things and they would have just ran with it. I mean, they were just really eager to do whatever they could. I mean, at that point, you're dealing with guys that they just want to win. Whatever we're doing, whether it's a rondo, whether it's a passing exercise, 6v6, the guys just want to win.
Dude, I tell that to the high school players I coach all the time, because sometimes I feel like they take it easy or whatever. They know they're a starter and they kind of take some of the, goof around in a rondo. But that's why I think I took my game to the next level. And that's what I think is important in establishing a culture for your team is in rondos, be the best in a rondo, have the cleanest touch in a passing pattern. That kind of stuff goes a long way. So when you have players like that, it makes coaching easier too.
Yeah, so these guys, they were all, wonderful kids, guys I still have a relationship with today, but when they stepped onto the field, sometimes they would take, take the look of a different person, a fierce competitor. There were several times, in sessions at NIU where we maybe have to stop it for a second, or guys would come to blows because at that point they're not even recognizing it's their team. It's just, I have to beat you. You're my man and I have to beat you. But yeah, I think to your point earlier, Kat, I think at that point I was probably, picking up on the vernacular a lot more. And as an assistant, usually, you're probably trained more at that point to work more in the shadows of the head coach.
Yeah.
So pick out a little thing here and there in the smaller picture that might help the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So I was really encouraged to do that.
Mhm.
And I think kind of focusing on the minute details helped me expand my scope of awareness to then kind of looking at the overall picture. But I think that point as well was really, really helpful for my growth, because you're noticing small things that might make a massive difference.
Yeah. So you were talking about like noticing small things. I'm guessing you're talking about in like the full team sense as well. I kind of do that. Like, so there's a head coach at the prep, and then I'm the assistant, and it's most of the time it's just us two, like evaluating games or at training sessions. And like, I could definitely tell I would like, so Jake, the head coach, he'll, do the halftime team talk. Right. And like, while we might be talking about the same things, I'm not as good as, communicating that kind of stuff or pointing that stuff out. But what I try to work on is like, I'm that guy that has a notebook at the games and writes things down. But like, I try and think of like one or two things that we did well or that we did poorly, or like how we're transitioning to defense or reacting after we lost the ball or something like that. And I think those small details help me. But like the bigger picture things, I'm not as good at, because that's experience, and you got to be a better coach for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think, your theory and your understanding of the game from that point, it only ever increases as you get older. So for young guys like us, you want to pick up certainly as many things as you can. But one thing that I realized from working with Ryan Swan and the rest of the staff, one of the critical points, not just in coaching, sessions, but, in games as well, you have to have an understanding of where you want to go at all times. And, that may change, from game to game in terms of your preparation, but there was always a consistent message that Swan, got across about, the mentality and the speed of play and the way, guys were supposed to play for each other. So I think kind of fostering that culture and watching it kind of take precedent was really helpful for me, in the sense that you always want to make sure that the guys are on the same page, and as a staff, you want to make sure that you're on the same page as well. So yeah, I probably at some points I was thinking the same things, but maybe not articulating in the same way, just because you may not have the right verbiage. But I think that the more you're able to spot those things, and I think a notebook is a brilliant thing to have at any point in time.
Half the time I can't even understand my writing, but just like me thinking, what can I write down? And then it makes me pay closer attention to things that I would write down.
Yeah. I completely agree. And, at that level as well, things are happening so fast. If you don't pick it up, you may miss it in that instance. But I think it was great as well, to have 4 coaches on the sideline, on the bench. And, you have 4 sets of eyes looking at 4 different things that might be of equal importance.
Yeah.
So that was great.
So you obviously learned a lot at NIU. Why did you leave? Talk us through that and what you're learning at Rochester.
So I never, I never planned to. I wasn't actively looking for other positions at any point in time. I loved it at NIU, and would always consider the opportunity to work with those guys again, because they're brilliant guys for me. And the players were fantastic as well. But I realized kind of, you get to that point in, in your career that, you want to make sure that you've refined all your tools as a coach. And I wanted to be looked upon more as a well-rounded coach than just a goalkeeping coach. And that was my prime responsibility, at NIU. So I maybe wasn't being exposed sometimes to things like, the rest of the team session, or, recruiting, or some of the other things that went into what makes a program great. So I got a phone call about a position opening up at the University of Rochester. And, the more I did research and the more I asked around, their head coach, who's my boss now, Chris Apple, had been a guy that had well-rounded experiences in all divisions of the game. He had a professional stint in Germany. He, was an educator for the United States Soccer Federation. I mean, this is a guy that he's exemplary at his craft. He's a lifelong learner, a lifelong teacher. And he, took an interest in bringing me to the U of R, and, the level of interest that he expressed and kind of what the position entailed, not just being a goalkeeping coach, but, actively planning team sessions and actively coaching that way, and being a real protagonist on, the recruiting efforts and going into some of the organizational things from a structural perspective that make a program great.
Yeah.
It was just an opportunity that was too good to pass up at also such a wonderful academic institution.
Yeah. So I think, so pretty clearly NIU, like they had their stuff together on Division I landscape, like that program's like staying at the top for a while, I'm guessing. And Rochester's like already at the top, and you got to keep it there. So they have their stuff together. So it wasn't so much like going from a bad program to a good one, or a good one to a bad one to try and rebuild it. It was like kind of a lateral move, I guess, just like different end goals in mind. Were you thinking, I want to be a Division III head coach like in 15 years or in 10 years or something like that? Or is it just like, I think I could learn the most?
Yeah, I think it was mostly about, where can I go that, I'm going to be, learning, a large amount while also being able to put those things into practice. I think with apps, he lets me, take the reins of things. And at the same time, I think he's also comfortable with letting me fail, with letting me get it wrong.
Yeah.
And, he'll be the one to tell me, but I think you talk about things in a training environment, like empowering players. He's someone that empowers coaches. So he's constantly in my ear, and he'll always be there, with me, after a session, to reflect and make it as best as I possibly can and get the right things across. But, yeah, I mean, it's, from a move perspective, I wasn't thinking, well, I want to be a Division III head coach, because I think the moves now, like the next thing could be anywhere, and I hope to be here for a long time, and I hope for us to win. But it was at that point, the challenge of, you are at kind of the pinnacle of one level. How can you motivate yourself to make sure that the program stays at the top of its game, that you stay at the top of your game, that you continue to grow, while also just taking on more responsibility.
That's
so
cool.
Now, like, yeah.
I was thinking, like, a lot of people would just go with the end goal, like, I want to be a head coach, or I want to make the most money while also coaching. But if you just take it and look at, like, we talk about process over results, if you just say, how can I become the best coach and learn the most and like get the best experience, like it makes sense. And if it sets you up better for the future, then great, but you'll have like the tools and the skills to be able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, with going in conjunction with that, it's like, as young guys now, you want to learn as much as you possibly can before you maybe mentor someone else.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is a fantastic opportunity to take on more responsibility while still having that learning component to it. So these were intangibles for me that I thought were going to be, great for not just my growth as a coach, but also, my growth as a mentor to student athletes.
My light turned off over there, so I went to switch it on. But
I saw that. You need some light from over here.
Yeah, my computer's running out of battery too. I'm running on E, but we got to finish. So obviously, like, I think you've told us a lot about like your journey and what you learned. What about from a goalkeeping specific perspective? What do you look for? And if you're watching a goalie, whether it's recruiting or you're just like watching them on TV, what do you look for in a goalie, and as regular soccer fans like me and Chad, non-goalies, how does the view differ?
Yeah, so I mean that's such a great question. I used to watch the goalkeeper. When we watch the Premier League, maybe on the TV, I'd probably watch a lot of what the goalkeeper did as a younger guy in possession. So whether that's distributing the ball, making a save, claiming a cross, all those components. And I think now I probably watch the goalkeeper more out of possession than I do in possession. So a big thing with that, I would say, is positioning. So are they constantly reevaluating their start position? Are they doing things in front of them in terms of, commands and efficient, effective actions to, reorganize the defense, reorganize the shape so that they don't have to, deal with problems later on, whether that's around the box or outside the box. But yeah, I would say positioning is the biggest thing. And that goes into whether I'm watching a professional or a prospective student athlete. Is the goalkeeper constantly reevaluating, reassessing their position?
So
Is that
sorry. So if let's say you're recruiting, do you look at someone that might have like the physical tools, can make a great save, maybe has pretty good distribution, but like his positioning needs work? Is that something you could fix?
It's certainly something you can fix. At least for me, I just think the positioning side of the game, I think that shows that someone is constantly engaged. And you want players that are constantly engaged for 90 minutes. And I think, when you start to realize that, like we said before, the little details can make a big difference. Being in a step, in a step over or a few steps over in the wrong spot in a game throughout the flows of it can compromise, your ability to have success, when the ball comes to you. So those are things that just tell me the player is engaged, the player is focused. And of course, there's other things that come after that I'll look at that. Well, that's probably the first thing I'll look for.
Yeah, that's interesting because a lot of times we'll look at a guy, someone takes a shot and he makes a great save, and we're like, yeah, he's such a good goalkeeper, but like maybe he made a good save because he was out of position, or maybe he messes up a lot and just makes the one good save, or And I think as a soccer community, soccer fans, we're getting better at watching goalkeepers' distribution. I mean, sometimes it's easy to see a ball that he clips over the top that hits the striker's chest and he's got hold up play. But sometimes I think someone will play a center back, or they'll play the ball as a center back, but he's under pressure immediately. Like, that's probably not good distribution.
Yeah. So I think you bring up a good point. And Chad, just, being a current player as well, I'd love to kind of get your perspective on this, on the evolution of the position. But the next thing I'd probably look at, you talk about things like making a brilliant save, but I think the goalkeeper that I would always want in my team and the team of others is how easy does he make the simple saves look? So, catches, front smothers, things like that, like the balls that he probably should be saving, like how efficiently, how well does he do that? So, I mean, Chad, just to get your perspective, because I'm so curious about, the relationship that field players have with the goalkeepers in their team. But do you always figure like you want the guy on your team in six aside that's going to always do the little things right?
Hold on, I'll be right back. I'm going to go grab my laptop charger. You guys answer that one.
Yeah, definitely. For me, a goalie who's always kind of doing what he needs to do, if he's always communicating and stuff like that, is someone that helps me out as a player. We have a really good goalie on our team, so I know he's reliable back there, and he'll be able to make the saves when they come, and he'll be able to communicate, be able to tell the people in front of him, because I can't see behind me. Playing center mid, I can't really see behind, so when he's communicating that stuff to me, that helps me out a lot.
Yeah, for sure. It's I think sometimes we look at the great save and we think it's the end all be all, but there are so many other things that a player does in a game that goes beyond that. Even just going to another position. You're not always banging in goals and providing assists. You're covering the ground, you're putting in tackles, you're breaking up play, you're organizing things in front of you. So I think making sure that people have a deeper appreciation for some of those other intangibles that maybe they don't look as they're not as easy on the eye, but they're just as important, if not more important. So yeah, I would just to reiterate, I think how the technical aspect is important, but how well do they do the little things? And I think that goes for every player. So that's probably the second consideration I'd have, whether it's watching someone on television or watching a prospect. That's probably the second big component. So I think the making of those two things there, I think you probably at that point can envision that, there's a lot of other things that are probably at that point an icing on the cake that, take a good player to a great player.
So I missed,
that is.
sorry, I had to, my laptop just like the battery just gets sucked out of it for some reason. So I missed that little piece, but I heard you talk about like little things. And I noticed that when you watch someone who thinks they're a good goalie compared to someone who's like knows the goalkeeping position, like with you, when you played, I didn't realize it till now, but like the ball comes and you hold it, right? It doesn't bounce. You don't like just hit it away, or like little things like that make a big difference too.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're touching on something that's like the elite level. I think you kind of get into that, like that tactical understanding. Some guys think that, goalkeepers parry the ball in certain areas by chance.
Yeah.
They do that by design. There's a tactical and there's a technical component to that. Parrying the ball away from danger or holding the ball, knowing that runners are coming in the box. Like these are things that, separate the good from the great.
Mm-hmm. Because sometimes there'll be a shot and you'll be like, oh, great initial save, but you really should have hit that one out or held on to that or smothered it. But now these guys are just putting it back in the mixer and someone comes and finishes.
Yeah. So I think that, that's a good point as well. To go along with the technical aspect, guys that look to catch the ball and know that they can, that is such an invaluable tool because you're talking about not just, saving your team, from dangerous moment, but you're also talking about a completely switch of possession. Yeah. So if a goalkeeper makes a catch, you go from defending to attacking. There's probably an aspect to that where, the group can transition efficiently, but also, if you're a team that's maybe defending for 4 or 5 minutes in a certain kind of block at a time and you're on the back end, having a goalkeeper that allows you to, cease defending and kind of start that transitional moment is massive.
Yeah, definitely. It's something like we don't really think about, but when you say it, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Goalie's the quarterback.
Wow. That's very insightful, Chad. QB1, Mike Tringali.
I love that.
He's like a Peyton Manning back there. So my last question, and then Chad, on if you have any extras. Like, do you think is there a certain age where goalkeepers need a goalkeeper-specific coach? Can they still get better? Just maybe you pair off the goalkeepers and they go like do a warm-up by themselves, and then you just let them hop into team drills. Probably like an very old school way of coaching.
Yeah. So I'll answer kind of that first part, and then I'll kind of expand to the other ones. I want to see for everyone at home, and even the two Catalana brothers in this podcast, if they know. So I recently read a report from UEFA, which is of course the governing body of soccer in Europe, and at the last recent European Championships, of the 45 goalkeepers that played, can you guess how many of those goalkeepers were playing the position full time before the age of 12?
5. That would be my guess.
2.
Wow. So you guys are actually way closer than they thought. There were 4. So 4 goalkeepers in that setup were playing the position full time before the age of 12.
So when you say that, it makes sense because they're going to be good with their feet. And before, like, I just want to get on a rant that, like, at my like local youth club where I coach, there's like, there was somebody talking about like goalie training for U8s. It's like, come on, like, really? We need a goalkeeper. Yeah. Like, let them play soccer and have fun and get good with their feet and understand the game. They don't need a goalkeeper coach at U8.
Sorry. Yeah, I agree. Like, and that brings me back to, when I was in Illinois, excuse me, and, I was working with like a U11 boys team. There's so many guys in the team like, oh, I want to play goalie. I want to play goalie this half. And it's important, I think, like, at that age, like, everyone plays every position. Yeah. You don't restrict guys to anything. If a parent says, my son is a goalie full time, like, he's the goalie of the team. Yeah, well, I think it's going to enrich his soccer education and maybe even expand his knowledge and his enjoyment level if he's open to playing other positions. Yeah. So this just doesn't happen at grassroots. This happens at the pro level too. And I know she's not playing anymore, but I'm pretty sure even a player like Hope Solo, and who's a prominent goalkeeper in the national team for many, many years, I don't think she even played goalkeeper until late high school, early on in the college ranks, she was a center forward. So
I hate when
things
people
change.
specialize too early. I think the top European teams, they'll have that right because they see a player who might be good or like a player who's athletic. Jake, the head coach of the prep, he was telling me that somewhere in England where he used to live, they would have the academy team would have a meeting with the parents, but next to the door they would have a measuring stick. So the parents would walk in and they would look at how tall the mom and dad were to try and project like how tall the kid was. So like these kids might be 12 and then they'd be like, all right, it's a tall dad. Let's make him a goalie.
Yeah, for sure. And that makes it even like all the more interesting now. I mean, there's an older story about probably one of the best goalkeepers of all time, Dino Zoff. And Dino Zoff was turned away in Italy from all the prominent academies, AC Milan, Inter, Juventus, because he was only about 5'11".
Mm-hmm.
And he actually ended up being something of a late bloomer, but he had this really prominent career, and he ended up winning Italy the World Cup at the age of 40 and playing for Juventus. But it's like, yeah, I mean, there's only so many projections you can make, and some of these models are only as good as the data you put into them.
Yeah.
So I would say to kind of expand on that note, like I think players shouldn't really be specializing until maybe about 14 years of age.
Yeah.
In certain cases, maybe even later. But, I can speak from my own experience. I mean, I probably didn't start playing goalkeeper full time until maybe just, a few months before my 14th birthday.
That's pretty good though. Like,
so
it's funny when I think we were talking about it before, like either when I first met you or like when everyone at Stevenson first met you, they thought you were like a sick, like number 10, like you really didn't look like a goalkeeper. We all thought you were like a field player or something.
Yeah, I think I came in with like my match fit top, and I had like these white predators. Maybe they're like turf predators with the tongues hanging out of them. And everyone was like, "Oh, this guy looks like a free kick specialist."
Yeah, like this guy can really strike a ball.
Yeah, and being left-footed as well. I think no one cared after they realized I was a goalkeeper that I was left-footed. But at that point,
I still feel like we could put you at number 10, and you could do all right.
Yeah, play between the lines now and anticipate. But so I mean,
like a modern day James.
To expand on that a bit, I mean, so that last part you were saying, so are you talking about more like what like goalkeeping training should be looking like now, or how it differentiates? Was that
so I was asking, like, can goalkeepers improve without goalkeeper training? Like, obviously they might get bigger or more athletic, and they might face a lot of shots in like a team scrimmage or a small sided game, but do they need to be doing goalkeeper specific things? Let's say like a high school level, because for a lot of times it's me and Jake, and the goalkeeper coach on the staff he's the JV coach. So he might not be around. And I don't think we've run enough goalkeeper specific sessions. Now, sometimes it's hard when you get into the flow of the season and all that stuff. But I feel like we've done the goalkeepers a disservice because we haven't given them enough sessions by themselves.
So that's a hotly contested topic, and there's probably 10 other podcasts, around the world that maybe discuss this at some point or another. But it's in my view, at least, I mean, if you're going from the grassroots level and you're talking about like younger kids and you want to make it fun, I think there just has to be the technical components. So catching, diving, positioning, hand position, set position, these are foundations, building blocks to anything from any position. But I think as you kind of get more into, the higher levels now, both, club soccer, high school soccer, college soccer, professional, you're going to run into, certain challenges. Maybe it's field space. Maybe it's a coach that doesn't, know the position as well. Maybe it's a lack of equipment or time. Time is probably the biggest one because coaches want the goalkeepers to jump in at a moment's notice. But I would say now, at least something we try to do at the college level, and I think you would see the higher levels of high school age boys and girls, going into, being younger adults. The responsibility of the goalkeeping coach in a lot of senses is to, paint pictures of what the goalkeeper is going to see on a match day. So how realistic can you make your sessions to the game? How well can you prepare them for what they might face in the rest of the session? and always making sure that they're working in conjunction with the rest of the staff.
Yeah.
So I think you always want to focus on a topic that is going to not just prepare them for the session, but also is going to be prominent in a game. I think we see, with the evolution of social media now with Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, you see a lot of things that aesthetically look really nice. So the goalkeeper's working on the beach and going through hurdles and ladders, and he's diving into the water and parrying a ball, 40 yards, and it looks fantastic. And maybe there's a fitness component to that, but I look at that and I say, is this person going to be doing all these on a Saturday or a Sunday? And I'd say, at that point, probably not. So I think, social media has helped with maybe prioritizing some of the things that are important, but also kind of exposing more what holistic approaches can be taken to the position and training as well.
Holistic approach. That's a buzzword right there. So that's kind of similar to, like, you see a lot of people on YouTube or TikTok or whatever, they post like soccer training videos. And like, I'll post some of them to my TikTok too, but like a lot of the times they're not realistic at all. And there's one thing, like, you spend time with the ball, no matter what, you'll probably get better. You'll probably get sharper. So if you spend time, like someone punting a ball to your face and like hitting it up in the air, like your reactions will get better. But like it might not like really translate. So it's hard to say like that doesn't work, because if you do it enough, it'll probably make you a little bit better, but it's not like really what you should be doing. And
right.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm not knocking those sessions at all. Those are great people, and they're
I've seen
impressive
some
for sure.
Stuff, so.
I mean, I guess my question would be is, how often are those people doing that in a game is my thing. So that's the big takeaway. I think you want to work, not just as a player, but as a coach, you want to work on the things that guys are going to be exposed to the most in a game setting. So, you prepare them the best way possible.
Sorry. So here's another thing. If you're a goalkeeper, like, do you go through a warm up of like catch and hold, maybe like swat away or something, and like get like technical work out of the way and then transition it into like a bigger, like game realistic thing? Or is it just game realistic from the start?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So the way we break it up is we'll usually do a technical activation. And the activation will prepare them for the movements that they'll be doing, like when the session kind of expands itself. So if it's something like, catching or diving or dealing with services, from an angle or around the 18-yard box, the activation will be kind of a smaller component of that. But what I usually tend to do is, kind of work backwards. So you have an idea of what you want the session to look like at the end when you put all the components and, complexities into it, and work backwards from that. So that helps me, plan out an activation that isn't just going to, physically, and mentally prepare the goalkeeper for the work we're about to be doing, but also allows them to start to kind of get the understanding of what they're going to be seeing, as we progress. So the words that we use with each other to reinforce good habits will remain the same, and allows us to progress from that. So if at the end of the session, if the last activity is dealing with crosses, and I've gotten the mannequins out and we're going to be doing services from wide positions, I would like the activation to make sure I would like the activation to have a lot of catching above the head, making sure that they're going up with one leg to protect themselves and coming down with two, getting the ball at their highest point. So getting kind of that activation from like a physiological perspective, but also making sure that we're going through the terms that they're going to be seeing and dealing with.
That's similar to I think a lot of higher level training sessions for like good teams. You see sometimes teams have their own passing patterns that they do like every practice or whatever, but a lot of times I think in like the higher level trainings, it's like a pattern related to how they want to receive the ball, like their body position and stuff, and then maybe going into like a smaller game with like some defenders or something, and then expanding. So it seems like goalkeeping is like the same way. And like the soccer people have figured out that's like psychologically the best way to, and physically, to prepare the player for the end goal.
Exactly. And I think with that point, Kat, and I mean, Chad, as someone that's been actively taking part in sessions, like, correct us if we're wrong here, but I think like when you go through the activation, it's something that's a lot more controlled. And then as you expand into like the more complex activities, it looks a lot more like soccer, and there's probably, you know, more variation. So different things can happen. How do you respond, you know, to such a stimulus, and being open as well to dealing with different things. So that's definitely something like I've kind of taken away rather in my experience. But I mean, do you feel as a player that that's a certain model that, you know, that guys respond to, in abundance?
Too many big words. He might not understand what you're saying.
You did say some big words. Might stump me a little bit, but yeah, definitely. I mean, oh yeah.
So, like,
Yeah, I guess.
what, like in dumbed down words, Chad, like, do you start with the last, I guess, activity of a training session? If you work backwards, do you think it all like links up?
Yeah, it should be like that. I feel like, and
Because we've all been in bad training sessions where here's a drill, here's another drill, here's another drill, just go do it, and it's like that doesn't do anything.
well, it shouldn't be just like all over the place.
Yeah.
Like it should have a main focus and then lead up to something.
Mm-hmm.
Goalie's a different position than everything else, but it should be trained the same way that like field players are being trained. So like goalie should be trained the same way and then have a focus at the end. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, at its simplicity, I think that's just spot on, because at the same time, you want it to look like soccer as much as it possibly can, because that's ultimately what it is. You know, as cliche as that might sound, but it's also, you know, preparing the guys as much as possible. So I mean, that's a big question we ask ourselves as a staff at U of R, like, what we're playing right now, like, does it look like soccer? Like, is it directional, and are there things that, you know, are there components to it that make it realistic?
That's honestly something that I think could be another separate topic in another day. But like, I see a lot of like, I think older guys, or maybe just guys who aren't up to speed, I don't know, like they give their players drills, whether goalkeeper or field player, and it's like, master these drills or get good at these drills or this skill set, but it's not in a soccer game. So like they might pass from this cone to this cone and this cone to this cone, and like they might get better at receiving a ball and passing with their right foot, but like you can't really put that into a game. It doesn't really look like soccer. So it's like a time and place for it sometimes, I think. But like I talked to you about like a non-directional possession game, just a big square and playing possession. Like I think that's okay. It gets the players going. You get moving. You just get touches on the ball. But like if that's a bulk of your practice, like it's not good.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you're talking about something that's probably more of an activation. It's getting the mind and the body and the team prepared, you know, to pass and move and play at a certain tempo. But I would say, yeah, if that's like going to be your main activity, I think you're going to leave the players not only wanting more, but also kind of leaving them questioning, well, what was the focus of today?
Yeah.
So
that's cool. I think, do you guys have anything else? I mean, we've been on for almost 2 hours now. Chad, you got anything?
No.
Talk too much?
Yeah.
All right. Mike, you got anything else?
no, just thanks for having me, guys. I'm a massive fan of the podcast.
We're trying to get some merch soon, so we'll send some your way.
And, you know, love to you know, come back at a later point in time. Yeah. But no, thanks for having me.
And so you're the first guest, but like you should just be a regular on the show, whether it's like once a month or every few episodes or something, because we have a few other people who could be guests, but like you could just come on whenever, and like it just fits, it gels, you know.
Honored to be an associate member for this group. Oh, what did you say, Chad?
I said you could talk championship. You're a big championship guy.
Loves the championship. Come on, you Swans.
Yeah, I mean, I think we got to appreciate the football league in general, don't we?
Yeah, little Matt Miazga, Cameron Carter-Vickers action.
Exactly.
Some Jeff Cameron. All right, cool. So that's gonna be it for this episode. So hopefully, if everyone's listening, kind of give us reviews. You know, hit us up with some questions. I actually have some good questions on TikTok that we could answer maybe next episode or something. So maybe it's time for another Q&A.
soon.
Hopefully we got some goalkeepers out there, or we educated some non-goalkeepers. So that was awesome.
Or maybe we made some goalkeepers.
Yeah, maybe I'm a field player, but I might just have a second career as a goalkeeper.
Lovely.
All right. Peace, guys.
All right. Bye.
Episode 13.